Welcome to Got Grass, conversations with the legends and leaders of bluegrass. You've enjoyed live bluegrass at Guitar Town CT concerts in Hamden, Connecticut since 2008. From Tony Rice, Rouse Stanley, and Doyle Lawson to Tim O'Brien, Sierra Hall, and Billy Strings. Now you can go behind the scenes as we chat with your favorite bluegrass stars. I'm your podcast host, Chris Worth. I'm very happy to welcome Kristin Scott Benson to our podcast, Got Grass. Welcome, Kristin.
Hey, thanks for having me.
For those of you who don't know, there's probably nobody out there who doesn't know, but Kristin has won a lot of IBMA awards for Banjo Player of the Year. She's won the Steve Martin Banjo Prize, which I guess was a nice prize, because doesn't the cash award go with that one?
That's true. Yeah, that makes that one extra special.
And she's been a key member of the Grascals since 2008. That's a pretty long run with one band, isn't it, in bluegrass?
It is. You know, there are a lot of musical chairs when it comes to bluegrass bands. And, I think I finally found a home when I landed with those guys.
Yeah, seems like it. I usually start the podcast by asking people, what do you do on your day off when you're not playing the banjo? What's your favorite day off pastime, if you have one?
Sure. I guess my biggest hobby these days is pickleball. And I do enjoy playing it. I don't get to play nearly as much as I would like. But, one of my favorite ways to start a day is just to be able to sleep in, which is rare anymore. And we have the sweetest dog in the world, Fisher, and he loves it when we can wake up slowly. So I love to start a day like that. And then if there's some pickleball involved later on, that's a great day too.
You play pickleball with your husband by any chance, or do you have other pickleball friends?
No, he is not a sports guy, and I was always really into sports and athletically inclined. I love to watch football, and he doesn't care about football at all, although I have wooed him a little bit. He gets into it once the playoffs start.
Got you. So you're from South Carolina, correct, originally?
Correct, yeah.
And you're there now?
I do. I lived in Nashville about 15 years in between. And then when we had our son, he was about 1, and we moved back because we were very dependent on my mom and dad to help us with him, because Wayne traveled in third time out and I traveled with the Grascals. So we were very grateful for grandparents. And so we moved back to be closer to them.
Yeah. Is it crucial to go to Nashville to be a bluegrass musician still, do you think, or has that changed a bit?
It's really not crucial. I don't think ever. It's not as centralized as a lot of genres, for sure, like, country music, obviously, and contemporary Christian music. There's a lot centralized there. There certainly are a lot of people who live in Nashville who play bluegrass, but as long as you're willing to travel to the band, you can kind of live anywhere.
People up here, when we think of bluegrass, we think more of North Carolina than South Carolina. And is that wrong for us to think that?
No, I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah. Growing up in South Carolina, I can say that where we live, we're only about 10 miles from the North Carolina line. I'm only about 45 minutes from the home place of Earl Scruggs here. But I do think North Carolina is a bit more plentiful. There are some efforts in South Carolina to revitalize the bluegrass scene. For instance, in the upstate, there's an organization called Bluegrass Spartanburg, and they bring really high quality bluegrass to the upstate. So I'm thrilled to see efforts like that. But no, overall, I think North Carolina is a little bit better of a state for bluegrass.
Would you say that you kind of chose music, or would you say that music kind of chose you when you were younger? Or is there some difference between those two things?
I don't know. It's just a natural process like anything else. If you're exposed to something and you like it and you move in that direction, one thing just kind of leads to the other. And I was exposed to bluegrass, since forever, and started playing the mandolin when I was really little because we had one, and I was about 5 years old, and started playing the banjo around 12 or 13, and that's really when I got excited about music. But I certainly never intentionally planned to play it for a living. I kind of didn't know you could do that. You know what I mean? And each stage of life, I thought, well, I'll just do it, through college. So I intentionally went to Belmont University in Nashville so that I could be closer to the musicians there. And then I thought, well, when I graduate, I'll get a job. And that didn't happen. I got a job, but just to supplement bluegrass, not to, or the banjo, not to, be my full-time thing that I did. And then I thought, well, if I get married or have kids or whatever, and just never have stopped, thankfully. And I'm very grateful, to still be doing it.
Was there a time in your life when you consciously remember saying, I am going to be a professional bluegrass musician and that's it? Or you just
No, I never thought that.
evolved into it?
Yeah, I never thought it. And I think Wayne was kind of helpful. I almost got a master's degree in accounting because I could have done it for free, and had good relationships there at Belmont. And I thought, well, this is a great opportunity. And Wayne was he was a little bit older than I was. He was already in third time out and doing really well. And he was the first guy who ever, or the first person, who said, well, do you want to be an accountant? And I said, well, no. And he said, you're just postponing this commitment. You're just staying in school to reckon with it in your mind to make this responsible and okay. I was raised in a very blue collar way. My grandfather, however, was a professional mandolin player for part of his life. So I did have that influence, but it had been a long time since he had done that. So I think I struggle with it because I wasn't raised that that's something that you do. And my parents encouraged music, as much as anybody ever could. Everything they could do for me, they did. And I'm very thankful for that. But I still wasn't raised with that as a real possibility. So it just eventually turned into, oh my gosh, now I'm 40 years old. I guess I do this. It was never intentional.
Yeah. It's funny because I have three daughters, one in her teens, one in her 20s, one in her 40s. So my middle one, a lot of these kids go to college. They're not sure what they want to do, and they get a degree in accounting or marketing or finance. And then they end up working, and that becomes their job because they never really follow what might be their real passion. You get started in a job and you work, and then you're there.
That's absolutely.
It's really hard to get out of it and say, now I'm going to be a musician.
You're so correct.
Thank goodness you didn't become an accountant.
Oh, yeah. Well, I appreciate it. And I'm sure I've enjoyed life a lot more, but you nailed it. I majored in business. Actually, I was a marketing undergraduate major, and I just did that because it was kind of the most generic thing to do. I think a ton of business majors are that because they don't really have, as you said, a specified passion that's driving them. And I did have that, but it wasn't available at that point back in the 90s, late 90s. It wasn't like you could major in banjo or really pursue a degree in music on the banjo. And there are more opportunities for that now. But, going to college was always kind of plan B for me. I'm not sure I would have done that anyway, even if they had the Berkeley program or the ETSU program, which existed at the time, but there was no major at that time, and there is now. So there are a lot more outlets to formally pursue education with bluegrass and banjo these days. But they didn't have it then, and it's worked out, but it was just one foot in front of the other, and just grateful that, I believe there was a higher power ordering those steps for me because I sure wasn't doing it.
Yeah. What was your first bluegrass band that you played in? Do you remember?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the first band I ever joined was a gospel group. I was 15. And it was in the upstate of South Carolina, and it was a band called Furman Voice and the Harmony Express, and we just basically played churches, a few festivals. I did that until my senior year in high school, and that's when I joined my first band, which was an all-girl group called Petticoat Junction, and that was the first band in Nashville. And then I moved to Nashville and started going to Belmont University, played in a band for a while called Wild and Blue. And then really got going in my sophomore year. I joined the Larry Stevenson Band. And that's kind of when I missed the first day of my sophomore year to play my first date with him. And that was in Brunswick, Maine at Thomas Point Beach. And, that's when it really started rolling, and I got to play a lot of shows, and I was out a lot and meeting a lot of people. And gosh, I was just so happy to be playing the banjo. I was just tickled to death.
Yeah. I've heard, I listened to some of your interviews and podcasts. I heard you talk about how you heard Doyle Lawson and Quicksilver at one point in your life, and that was like a major moment.
That was it. Yeah. So this was in Dahlonega, Georgia. There's a Norman Adams Bluegrass Festival there. And I saw the band right after Doyle had transitioned from the original guys, except Randy Graham had replaced Lou Reed, but it was still Terry Balcom and Jimmy Haley. And I could tell that everybody was really excited to see this new group, which featured Scott Vestal on banjo, also Russell Moore and Curtis Vestal. And, there was just, weirdly, I don't remember the day set, and I may have played through there, meaning played as like found other kids and just run around and played, because I wasn't playing the banjo yet. But at nighttime, my parents would always reel me in. So see, we were going to bluegrass festivals before I was even playing the banjo. And I could just tell that crowd was curious and excited. You could feel it because Doyle he was on top during those days, and he changed his entire band. So people were excited to see this new lineup. And they walked out, and they were all so young. They were, I would guess, 20 to 25 in that range, and for sure. And so that caught my attention. And man, the first downbeat that they hit, and I think it was probably Misery River. And I just remember Scott's role, which of course was was very much patterned after Terry Balcom, even though I didn't know it yet. That was a song they had recorded prior to those guys joining. So man, they just hit that intro, and I just remember the banjo just mowing me down. And so at that point, I fell in love with that band, listened to that band all the time, started trying to get a banjo, and eventually ended up playing.
Yeah, yeah. I did see that interview you did with Doyle. I guess might have been during COVID because it was in two separate screens, but it was a fantastic, really good interview. You just you nailed those questions. It was a nice conversation. I really enjoyed. I've had Doyle on the podcast, and he's a fascinating man. He's so unassuming, and doesn't, I think, realize how huge a force he was for so many years, for so many people in bluegrass. He was the giant. But
Oh gosh, when you look at all the bands that were spawned from his group, I will miss many, but obviously the closest to home here would be Third Time Out, who my husband has played for about 30 years. Russell Moore is, the guy that I saw singing lead that night when I was a kid, and he heads the band Third Time Out that Wayne plays in. But you also have Mountain Heart and all these groups that were started. Now you have Authentic Unlimited, and many groups in between that were started as a result of guys leaving his band to do their own thing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I guess kind of like Bill Monroe, but I think Doyle was a much more instructive and kind and more of a teacher. Bill Monroe was kind of like looking for the cheapest help he could get sometimes.
Yeah, the first generation guys definitely had their ways. They were characters for sure.
Yeah. I know you also played with Larry Cordell. Larry was on the podcast a few months ago, and he's also quite a guy. I mean, really amazing. What was that like playing with him?
I loved playing with Larry Cordell. The best part about being in his band is that you get to play Larry Cordell songs. He's just this amazing songwriter. So if you're in his band, you get to kick off anything Southbound and Black Diamond Strings, and you get to play songs like Fields of Home and Highway 40 Blues. I mean, the material is just stellar for that band because it's largely built around what he has written. And I loved him. I loved his attitude toward music. He kind of approached it like with this rock and roll kind of sass almost. And I had a wonderful 3 years in the band with those guys.
Yeah. I saw a quote on your website, which I'm sure you're tired of hearing about, but I'm going to paraphrase anyway, which says that there was one glass ceiling in Bluegrass that no woman could cut through until you did. No woman had ever been a banjo player in a headlining all-male pop band until you joined the Grascals. That was in this quote from 2010, Bluegrass Unlimited. I'm sure you've seen it and heard it a million times. Did you think of yourself at the time as a groundbreaker for women when you joined that band, or were you just like happy to have a job with a great band?
That's absolutely how it was. If you trace that all the way back when that first happened, I guess that would have been with Larry Stevenson. And then I left there and moved to, Larry Cordell. And then, so it wasn't new for me to be in all male bands. But I think that article was written largely because at the time the Grascals were doing really, really well. They just won Entertainer of the Year for the second time, and that all predated me. But still, though, the point is they hired me, and I was just so grateful to be there. But even when to go back to where I started, even when Larry Stevenson hired me and I was 19 years old, I just didn't think about that at all. I was just so glad to have a job and so happy to be there, and just soak it all up. And that has continued throughout.
I remember I had Missy Raines on early on when I started doing this, and she was talking about her early days leading a band. And she said, well, after the show, I'd go to the promoter and I'd say, "Can you pay the band?" He'd say, "No, honey, you get the band leader out here. I'll pay him." And she said,
Oh,
"No." She was dealing with that kind of prejudice at that point. Like they wouldn't even take her seriously that she was the band leader. Have you faced stuff like that as
well,
a woman in bluegrass or?
I've been so blessed, and I haven't ever been specifically a band leader, but, I just am so lucky. I really don't have any negative stories, and I think it's largely a credit to, the women who went before and also the guys that I've traveled with. I've just always felt very, protected and safe with those guys, and there's a huge camaraderie there. And so, I shudder when I hear some of these stories, and I'm not sure why I've been shielded from them, but I'm very grateful that I have. I absolutely love Missy Raines, and I've played with her band. I've filled in a few times for them, and think the world of her. But yeah, there are definitely women who were ahead of me that probably helped, the folks my age and for sure younger. But, I feel like, to be completely transparent, I felt like I greatly benefited from being female because it did set me apart automatically. So whether they specifically remembered the band or my name or not or whatever, they probably just remembered the young girl, the teenage girl that was playing with that band, because I would have been the only one. So I had the advantage of, I don't want to call it being a novelty, but kind of, you got the benefit of being a novelty, I suppose. So I really do think that kind of just helped my recognition as far as people remembering who I was. Even if they didn't know all the details, they remembered that there was a girl that played the banjo at that festival. So, girls today, women today, don't have that benefit because thankfully it's so widespread, and I'm internally grateful that's the case. You can't hardly find a band where there isn't a woman anymore, and that's how we always wanted it to be and wanted it to be fully integrated. But because it is so common these days, they don't have the benefit that I had of it being rare.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but that's a good point. you're the band with a girl.
Yeah, and even if that's all they remembered, it at least helped them remember.
Yeah. I was thinking about IBMA awards lately and how many women these days are just killing it with IBMA awards. I mean, Allison Brown and Vicky Vaughn, you and Maddie and Bronwyn and Sierra Molly. I think of these old bluegrass guys from the early days must be rolling over in their graves thinking, what happened to our music? It's women have taken it over. And in a way, I feel like women almost have taken bluegrass over. I mean, there's so many great bands led by and populated it with women, singers, songwriters. It's just, I mean, it's amazing, really.
Yeah, I just think it's evolution. We can't go back in time and create more women in the genesis of the music. So it just took a few generations before it became commonplace. And there's, certainly no genetic advantage to being male. So once girls started being encouraged to play, within a couple of generations, you're going to have a lot of women doing it. And some of them are really, really, really great.
Yeah, yeah, it's phenomenal. You were inducted into the American Banjo Hall of Fame not long ago, right?
Yeah, I think in 23 or 4.
So when you got that honor, did you feel to yourself like, wow, am I old enough for this? Or, I mean, did you ever have that thought cross your mind? Like, I don't know, anything like that?
Yeah, I did a little bit. I went in with Ned Luberecki and who isn't that much older than me, Bill Evans, who may just be a little bit older than him. Those were the two bluegrass players, three-finger players who went in. They're both good friends, so I was happy to get to go in the same year that they did. But I did a little bit, just think, gosh, I'm that old, that you can start. I guess they figure I'm not going to change paths at this point. You've reached that. I think 40 is one of those milestone years where that was really, which I'm 49 now, so we're talking several years ago. But when I turned 40 and I was still playing full time, and our son was not little anymore. He was still a little fella, but he wasn't an infant or anything. I started just realizing that, gosh, I guess this is what I do now. And uh, I don't know why that was a big realization. I should have kind of known it already. But, once you hit your 40s, I think you just feel like, oh, I've invested enough time in this, that this is probably where I'm going to stay put. And I guess other people start looking at you the same way.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of a milestone year. You made it this far doing this, you're probably going to keep doing it.
Yeah, I guess so. And you're not young anymore. You can feel young. You can the lifestyle can be active and young, but by nobody's standards are you young anymore. You are absolutely middle aged, and career wise, that has some implications beyond just general age. You're probably committed at that point. Doesn't mean you don't do something adjacent to that. But, if you're still on the road, I heard Lynn Moore say something one time when I was really young, and it was kind of like a dagger to the heart. And I'm sure she wouldn't even remember this, but we were actually having a drink together, and she was still leading her band, and she was kind of the eternal band leader. She was always keeping track of musicians because as a band leader, you're always looking for the next whatever you need. And so we were talking, and I remember her saying, I don't count anybody until they're 30. And what she meant by that was you can't bet on a 25-year-old being even remotely still in the business until you're 30. The contrition is just, or attrition, I should say, is just so high until you get to about 30. And then if you can get through the major life changes of marriage and parenthood, if you can get through those seasons of life and you're still playing the banjo, you might stick around. And that's what she was saying with that very pithy one sentence comment there. And I was well below 30 years old. So it was kind of dang, this is like a danger zone, is kind of how it made me feel. But thankfully here we still are.
Oh, yeah. It's funny because I've noticed being a presenter of bluegrass, a lot of young bands come through.
Yeah,
Some, from Berkeley or wherever. They're all excited. They have a van. They're driving together, living together, eating together. They're in their 20s. And then
it's
it
true.
comes a point where a lot of them say, this has been great, but I just can't keep driving around the country for $400 a week. I can't do it anymore. And they go to whatever
It's
other,
a real thing.
it's a tough, I mean, I'm always amazed that bands can hold on in that lifestyle for that long because it just seems like
Yeah,
unless you're really making it big, like getting big paydays at festivals, if you're just driving around doing small gigs for 10 years, it's just seems exhausting and depressing after a
yeah,
while.
it kind of is, and I think the way most of us make it work, there are very, very few bluegrass musicians who only play in that band. And
Hmm.
there are even less now than there used to be because nothing is pre-COVID, uh, really. I mean, COVID changed everything for everybody, and a lot of musicians reinvented themselves, including me and Wayne. So, uh, most of us look at the band part of what we do as a part of what we do, so you may have a day job that isn't very related to music, or you may do what we do, which is teach during the week. So somewhat related, maybe you work at a bluegrass label, or, whatever it is. You just kind of cobble together all these different things, and you hope at the end that it makes a living. But, the bottom line, the reason I kept playing is because I just couldn't stand to do anything else. I just couldn't let it go. It wasn't that there was a time that it turned particularly lucrative ever. It just, as an overall lifestyle, it worked. And I had many opportunities to do, other things, and I just never had the heart to leave it behind. I just loved it too much.
Yeah. So there was never a time in your life when you seriously thought maybe I should do something else for a living, or was there?
Yeah, I mean, every day, still today, you think that, as far as like benefits. And, I kind of looked at it, you can have your cake or eat it too. It's like, um, the worst time really for a musician is when retirement hits, which doesn't feel, well, you never can retire. That's the thing, is that, there's a reason these guys are 88 years old. If they're still alive and on the stage, it's sadly because a lot of times they kind of need to be. So I feel like, we've really enjoyed our lives and our careers more than most people, overwhelmingly so. But that doesn't mean there aren't sacrifices. And some of those sacrifices are things like 401ks and employer health insurance and all those things that really do matter. But again, if you're blessed enough to figure out a way to live in this, kind of unorthodox bluegrass world, then you're one of the few. And I think you have to be thankful for that.
Yeah. Could you kind of break down roughly what your kind of income is from, say, performing, studio work, and teaching, like percentages roughly? Is that possible to do? I'm just curious because I always wonder. I know a lot of musicians are teaching now because, you need the revenue. And is it
Yeah.
doing
I mean,
stuff?
teaching used to be the add-on for us, and it's now the primary, and COVID is what changed that. And then, thankfully, I'm loving the Grascals these days. We used to play all the time, and there was no hardly time to have any other kind of job. It was just all consuming. We were playing, 150 actual shows a year. We were probably doing the Opry 20, 30 or more maybe times, and then we would do these press things that might be a couple weeks at a time, and then recording days on top of that. We were just gone all the time, and that was okay then, but I don't have any interest in living like that now. So we're capped at 50 dates, and then that allows me to do what I call the everything else stuff. So a lot of recording, a lot of filling in with folks, and a lot of teaching at camps. And I just did the Del McCurry, Jerry Douglas picking party in Arizona. And so, again, you just look at all these pieces of the pie. But if I called one primary, it would have to be the one-on-one lessons these days.
Interesting. Um, there was an interview you did for Banjo Newsletter where I loved your answer. The question was, how much do you and Wayne just sit around the house and pick? And the answer was absolutely never.
Yeah,
I chuckled out loud at that, but I understand it. You said, well, I'd rather watch TV or relax between that, and it makes sense. But you and Wayne do play together and have recorded together, right?
yeah, that was pre-Benson, which is the recording name that we have on Mountain Home Records. And, there's still not like we have a lot of time where he and I just get the banjo and the mandolin out again because we teach. It's in our laps hours a day already. So when the lessons are over, one of the greatest, I think the greatest downside of teaching is sometimes it kind of zaps your own creativity because you sit with it for however many hours a day with students, and that's its own precious thing. But then when it's over, you're kind of ready to do something else. And so that's his life. That's my life through the week. But we have greatly enjoyed this project that we have with Mountain Home Records called Benson. And it's just a recording effort. And it's just been the most wonderful thing because it's oddly not really like his mandolin solo records. It's not entirely like my banjo solo records, but it is a consistent thing itself. So I do think it's kind of a cumulative effort from us. And we've just really, really, really enjoyed that and gotten a lot of gratification from it.
Yes. Nice. I know you're now endorsed by and play Deering banjos, correct? And
Yes.
so you've played a lot of great banjos over the years, a lot of great pre-war Gibsons. What was it made you commit to Deering? Is it
Yeah, it was, again, I kind of didn't see that one coming either. I have an old banjo that I love and I was real attached to it. It's kind of like my mate, I didn't want to play anything else and, was never looking for an endorsement. And Jamie Lottie from Deering called me, or Laddie, I think they call him, and it's very confusing because Jamie Deering is the daughter of Greg and Janet and is CEO of the company. Jamie Laddie is COO of the company, so we kind of have to differentiate between them. But anyway, he called me with David Bradnowski and actually set the call up, and he said, we just want to talk to you about bluegrass banjo tone, is how he approached the conversation. Well, I'm not gonna turn that conversation down. I mean, that's like a favorite thing in the world to talk about is banjo tone. So he didn't approach it as a possible endorsement at all. He just said, we're here at Deering, we want to understand, like, what do bluegrass players, what is great tone in your opinion? So I mean, I was on board. So we logged on to the call, and man, they geeked out over it just same way I did. And I even played things for them, like, I think this tone is great because of this, and this tone is, and I just totally geeked out. And then they said, Laddie said, well, how about I send a few Deerings to Jens Kruger's house? Like, I'm not going to go to Yen's house for a day and play a bunch of banjos, so that just was hook, line, and sinker. I was in, and lo and behold, they sent these banjos to his house, and I got to spend the day with him, which was just one of the best days ever. So in awe of his musicianship, but also just his the way he, in a second language, can articulate things about banjos and tone, and just he has this beautiful holistic approach to banjo that I'm just in awe of. But anyway, so there was one particular one out of that group that I just kind of fell in love with, brought it home, sat with it a good while, decided to make some modifications, talked to Jamie Laddie about it, and there you go. So that it just was a step at a time without even realizing it. But I'm really into it. I enjoy it. I play it every day.
It's fun. I play guitar and some mandolin, and so when I go to a jam, guitarists and mandolin players pretty much just talk about picks. I mean, that's the main topic. What pick? How do you hold? Blah blah blah. Banjo players talk about every little detail, necks, resonators, tone rings. I mean, the minutia that even in a jam at my house, the banjo guy's telling me stuff I have no idea what he's even talking about. Is that just something specific about banjo players? They just love all the little stuff about banjos. I mean, it seems
I
like
mean,
it.
there's just a lot of parts
A lot of
to a
parts.
banjo. I mean, you're looking at, but boy, I don't know. My husband geeks out over mandolins just insanely. He's way more into that sort of thing with mandolins than I am with banjo. Like I love talking about banjo tone, but I'm not a craftsman minded in any way, and he certainly is. And he can just geek out on the wood grain and the different tops and that sort of thing. And we have those same things. You love mahogany or walnut or maple and that sort of thing. But I think banjo guys tend to be into those details just because there's so many parts on a banjo. You can do so much to it. It's so easy to customize. It's also really easy to screw your banjo up and make it sound terrible. But it's like a machine. So there's a lot to what bridge are you using? And you can change your bridge just like that. And, I carry probably 30 banjo bridges with me, at all times. Yeah, I have a lot of bridges around. And what's your head tension? There's just a lot of things you can modify. So I think it generates conversation.
That makes sense. Yeah. A lot of parts, a lot of changes, a lot of things that can change the tone and the playability, right? Quickly. Yeah. So as a guitar player, I listen to a bluegrass guitar player play, and I can tell right away what their style is, how good they are, if they're copying Tony Rice. I mean, I can pick up a guitar style right away. Banjo players, I really can't pinpoint the difference between good banjo players. Like what makes one different? I don't know whether it's because you play so many notes or whether it's just you have to be a banjo player to get into that whole. But could you kind of describe maybe how your banjo playing style is different from other good banjo players that makes you win the award 7 years at
Um,
IBMA? Like, what is it about your style that's, I don't know, that makes it unique or different? If you can put it into words, or
Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't think it is very much different. Honestly, it's banjo is a little different in that Scruggs within bluegrass banjo, there are so many. The banjo world is big these days. For instance, I have a book coming out published by Hal Leonard that I co-authored with Bill Evans, and they have this series. It's the second book I've written for them. 25 great saxophone solos or whatever, oboe solos. I think they have it all. And they wanted me to do banjo, and I made them commit to calling it 25 great bluegrass banjo solos because the banjo is so big now. It's making it's a probably erroneous assumption to think that it's going to be bluegrass because it doesn't have to be. But within the world of bluegrass, which is certainly where I live, we're if I had to try to explain it, I would say that the content is very similar. This is probably why it's hard for you to hear a huge difference. And the content is, honestly just Earl Scruggs content. And there are the Reno players, the Stanley players, but most of us would fall into that Scruggs camp. And that doesn't mean even, sadly, though, that the players that are great necessarily even went all the way back to Earl, even though there's no substitute for that. But, Crow and Sonny Osborne and Bill Emerson and all these people that were second generation players, I think the one thing that sets Scruggs apart that makes him so exceptional, is that the framework that he created in the late 40s, early 50s is still basically what we're all doing today. Now, it's changed, it's evolved, new things have come into bluegrass that you do have a few stylists. Ron Block is a great example of a bluegrass stylist where you're probably going to know pretty quickly that this is Ron Block playing the banjo. He has that trademark thing he does with bends and kind of approaches it from a guitar standpoint at times, but still so heavily rooted in Scruggs that I would say the content is pretty uniform. It's just basically the stylistic differences come in two main ways. How do you arrange those chunks of information? So it's largely an instrument of assembly. And by that, I mean, it's, you have these Scruggs chunks. And then even if you learn them secondhand or even third hand, they probably got passed down pretty reliably. If it's Jim Mills, you can bet that's an authentic Scruggs phrase. So if you're a Jim Mills zealot, you're actually a Scruggs zealot, whether you realize it or not. So it's largely unchanged. Now, how we assemble those chunks is one differentiation. And then the biggest differentiation, though, is going to be execution and tone and how we deliver those chunks. So I think that's what makes banjo playing sound possibly very genetic in the bluegrass world is, generic in the bluegrass world is just that he did such a great job creating this system that we still use today that it hasn't changed a whole lot. And so we all play the same stuff, more or less.
Yeah. Have you ever listened to Jerry Garcia's banjo playing before he became a deadhead? He was a big bluegrass banjo guy in the 60s, and he had a very interesting melodic, almost like, I don't know, Bill Keith kind of melodic style in the banjo, which kind of was similar to his guitar playing when he became an electric guitar player. I just wonder if you'd ever listened to Jerry Garcia banjo stuff. It's kind of cool. I'm not that familiar with it, but there was stuff on YouTube a little bit of him.
Yeah, I'm not real familiar with it, but we certainly had those. Maybe the next hugest innovation after Earl would have been Bill Keith, because he started playing things in the melodic style, and that was brand new, and that heavily influenced the players in the 60s, 70s, and even today. You have Alan Mundy and Tony Trischka, who started broadening banjo for sure a long time ago. The innovation didn't start with Bela Fleck, even though it skyrocketed with him. There were guys doing really cool things on the banjo that were different. But again, I play some different things on my banjo records. I for sure play some different things in different situations, but within that traditional bluegrass realm, it's probably still going to be pretty Scruggs based.
Yeah. When you're playing a gig with Grascals or any band, what do you do about staying in tune? How often do you have to tune? How do you tune? Do you tune just to a tuner? Do you try to tune to the band? Like, how does that? I know banjos infamously, well, every instrument player says my instrument goes out of tune all the time. Mandolin players, say that too. But I think banjo does go out of tune pretty easily. And how do you maintain that during a gig?
Oh, I mean, we have tuners and you have an ear, so you just touch it up as needed. I mean, the capo instruments are going to be more greatly affected by tuning when you move your capo, but hopefully between your ear, a tuner, and a good instrument, you can stay in tune pretty well.
Yeah, yeah. So you do a lot of teaching. I'm sure you teach players of all levels. What would be your primary advice to a young banjo player who wants to learn or is just learning bluegrass? What would you say really focus on when you're learning the banjo? This stuff that's going to stick with you. It's going to be the basis for everything you do. Was there anything you would say to them?
Yeah, for sure. If you can find a great teacher, a bad teacher can do irreparable damage, but a really good teacher can just speed you along. I was lucky, I had some great banjo teachers, and it definitely helped me get further down the road faster. So I would just encourage them to not, forsake the foundation that is Earl Scruggs, because, let's pretend that they're a huge Milne Pikelny fan or a huge Bela fan, or, those guys didn't skip it. And so if you try to be them without that foundation, it's never going to sound exactly right. So it depends on what their goals are. But if they want to be a bluegrass banjo player, even if they go to Jim Mills for the information, as I was describing earlier, banjo is an instrument of details. It's intricate. If you're kind of a free-spirited person who doesn't love attention to detail, banjo's probably not for you, and the things you have to focus on are authenticity and content and accuracy. and execution. It's a highly, you want to execute well on any instrument, but gosh, the right hand on banjo is just so crucial. So it's a painstaking kind of instrument. And if you're not natured to like that sort of process, then you're probably not going to stick with the banjo.
It seems that way. I've never really played one, and I'm strictly guitar and mandolin guy and piano. And I hear a lot of teachers saying, well, the thing I tell people when they're learning to play, especially with others, is to listen. The first thing I would say is to listen. Like you can learn a lot and just listen. You don't have to always have to be playing or trying to play fast, or listening is a skill. And I teach some bluegrass classes here, groups, and I find that that's a thing that a lot of older people, especially who grew up and play by themselves, and they join a group and they're just playing to themselves. I say, no, you have to listen to the other people, because it's all about the community that you're playing in. It's not just about what you can do.
For sure. Yeah, it's a communal, responsive kind of music. And I have ways of getting students to listen to great bluegrass if they're not. Sometimes I have people who have exceptional ability, but you can tell they just haven't listened to very much great bluegrass. So, I'll try to be sure that that's part of what we do together. And I have some ways of sneaking it in there to be sure that they do. But for sure, you can't write, you can't be a great novelist if you've never read any. So you have to listen for sure. And I just feel like it's a steady diet of good banjo playing. You have to be careful what you listen to, and you don't want to input bad information. Not saying that this music is bad, but when it comes to, again, bluegrass banjo, there's definitely the more tried and true kind of players that are probably going to pass down the raw information to you better than others. So you want to be sure that you're listening to some really great players.
Yeah. So that's going back to the classic bluegrass players. Any instrument is really a good place to start, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, I think they all have their spirit, and they attract. It seems to me that, instruments attract certain personalities a lot of times, and the banjo players, this is just, at this point, I'm willing to say it's a fact, because I've surveyed enough people and I've taught at enough camps, and I always do it. It's a nice icebreaker, and banjo attracts left-brained, kind of analytical type people. And I'm not sure if they stick with it because that works well with banjo, or if they're even attracted to it because banjo is just sort of nature that way itself. So it attracts people with a similar nature. But a singer-songwriter is going to have a lot different mentality than somebody who goes, oh no, that roll is not 3-1-3-1, it's 4-2-3-1, and they love that, and they hear that difference and they're exhilarated by it. That's a certain type.
Yeah, yeah. What's your sense of bluegrass these days in general? Are you optimistic? You think it's going in a good direction, becoming bigger and more popular, more inclusive?
Yeah, I think one of the cool things about it right now is obviously Billy Strings is a phenomenon. And if you look at the other people who are doing great, Molly Tuttle would probably be right there as well. And one thing that makes me really happy about seeing people like them do so well is they're great. How often do sometimes, an actor, particular musician will just erupt on the scene? They're not always great. They're just popular, and just for the integrity of the music's sake, it just delights me to see somebody that can play like Molly or Billy do so good, because then they can, hopefully point them back to the people that influenced them. And I think that there's a lot of that these days. And for sure, you have, like Sierra Hull is just phenomenal. And I don't believe that somebody finds Sierra Hull and then doesn't find any other mandolin player. It's probably going to spread the gospel, so to speak. So I think there's just so many great younger players, and they really are great, and they're getting a lot of attention. That makes me happy.
Yeah. It's fascinating to see some of these, Molly and Sierra, um, who have played bluegrass a long time. They're still pretty young, but they're really branching out to different things now. I mean, it's maybe a little bit bluegrass related, but it's definitely, I mean, Sierra Hull is not playing bluegrass when you go to see her in concert. She's playing Sierra Hull's music.
Yeah,
But
I
it all
love
ties back, but it's fascinating to me how where people are going with it.
Yeah, I love her music, and I love her, and I think she's phenomenal. And I think that they just are doing what interests them. And, I'm probably going to be interested in listening to it if they're interested in making it. And so, and they are, you're right, they've been around so long, but they're still so young. And it's just because they were so successful so young. Alison Krauss was like that. Her band was, amazing and great and hugely popular. And she was probably still a teenager at the time, or certainly early 20s. I mean, so some of these people just rise, to the top really fast. And so Molly and Sierra probably early 30s, I think. And yet it feels like we've had them forever because they've been doing it for so long.
Yeah, I remember when Sierra Hull first played here at Guitar Town, she was too young to rent a van. I mean, she was too
Oh,
really
yeah.
young to buy a drink in the bar.
Oh, gosh. I mean,
She
I
was so
met her.
talented.
She was probably 12. So, yeah, for sure.
This is a question I ask everybody, and I get interesting answers. But if you could have sat down and played music with anybody in music history that you didn't get a chance to play with, is there anyone that would be at the top of your list you'd just love to sit down on the couch and pick for a couple hours with?
That I didn't get the chance. Earl is the
Yeah.
first guy that comes to my mind. I did have only a real one real opportunity to do that. But that's immediately who I thought, if I could go back in time, and play with him, again, that would be amazing. Sonny Osborne would be there, even though I got to do that with him. I just miss him. And boy, what I would give to have, another chance to sit on the couch with him. And, but if it's somebody that I never got to play with, are you talking about a bluegrass or
Oh,
jazz?
I mean, yeah, but I guess anybody, really anybody musically that would be fascinating to sit down and hang with for a while.
Yeah, gosh, I don't know. Sonny and Earl are the ones that are coming to my mind, and I did have certainly more opportunities with Sonny than Earl, but I think part of it's just missing the ones that are gone. I'd love to see Crow again. I got to see Crow a lot at shows, and we miss them. I miss Bill Emerson. I was great friends with him, and so the people that are coming to my mind are not the ones I never got to play with, but they're the ones that I miss playing with. But within bluegrass, gosh, I don't know. I've gotten to play with a lot of them, so nothing's coming to mind. I mean, there are other musicians that, I love James Taylor and I love Jackson Brown and I love a contemporary Christian artist. I love Andrew Peterson. There's definitely people that I would probably never have the opportunity to play with that would be cool. But within the bluegrass world, I've gotten kind of lucky to play with a bunch of them. I got to play with Tony Rice very limitedly, but I did get to do that, and he's certainly a giant influence. I just got to play with Jerry Douglas, and I had done one song at IBMA with him, but I got to play a couple songs with Stuart Duncan here and there. So the ones that really impacted me, thankfully, I'm sure they wouldn't remember it, but it's etched in my mind. I've gotten to do isolated things with them. I never got to play with Doyle Lawson, not even a warm up tune. Never got to strike the first note with him, which is a shame because his band is the reason that I wanted to play. So there's my answer. That's who it would be.
That could too. You could probably go play with Doyle now. I mean, if out of his house, he'd probably play a couple of tunes with you. I know he's retired, but he might. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I would love it. I certainly admire him and, love his music. And, if it comes from the 80s, especially, there's a good chance he could say, kick this off, and I would be able to do it.
I had Rhonda Benson on the podcast, and I asked her that question, and she did say James Taylor. That was her answer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got to fill in with Rhonda a few times, and, filling in is fun. I play a lot with Woody Platt, play a lot with Darren Nicholson, fill in with Darren and Brooke Aldridge sometime. I love filling in because it's easy to shift into autopilot with the Grascals, and it just keeps you on your toes. You don't have necessarily pre-planned things going on. I'm always reading charts when I fill in, and it's more spontaneous for sure and less planned, and I think it just helps keep you sharp. So I love doing that. It's a lot of work, because you have to grab the set list and write your charts and then just kind of hope for the best and wing it. But I'm a high preparation kind of player, probably not surprisingly so. I don't trust my talent level enough to just wing it. And plus, I don't care who you are. If they say kick this off and you don't know the song, you can't kick it off no matter how easy it is. And we kick off all the songs. I hate mandolin and fiddle players when they're filling in. It's like, I'm kicking 80% of the songs off, and so I have to know them, like actually know the melody and stuff to get it going. And you get a kickoff, a verse, and a chorus before there's any chance you're going to have to try to play. But yeah, I love filling in, and I just love that interaction.
Funny you said that, because in my classes I teach, which are 6 or 7 people in a class, and there's a banjo in each class. And I say to this, and one of them's 80 years old, and I say, Joe, I'm sorry, but every song we do, you're going to have to kick it off. And he just looks at me like, really? I said, yep, that's your role.
Yeah.
I've been working on kickoffs now in class, and, counting off songs and starting them. And I said, this song really needs a banjo to start it. And he looked at me like, again? I said, yep.
Yeah, they're mainly banjo kickoffs for sure. And you have so much more freedom when it isn't the intro. You can maybe touch on the melody and then just kind of fill the space. So there's a lot less pressure to stick to the melody once the song is going. But, I have all kinds of little cheats that I use on my charts to hopefully at least get into the first or second line of the kickoff. I'll probably be able to hit the major touchstones anyway. So I'm a big chart reader and writer.
I was going to ask you about solos, because I usually ask people kind of in a song that or maybe an unfamiliar song, and it's your break time. What are you thinking about? Are you just letting your fingers go and just
No,
wing it?
the number
Don't
one
wing
thing, I'm usually thinking about the melody, and I might, depending on how far into the song we are, but even then though, I think one of the most interesting parts of banjo is finding that melody within rolls. That's really what the instrument is about. And you never run out of things to play if you stick to the melody. You're never going to run dry, because you can just serve the song and have done, the 3 T's: tone, taste, and timing. And so if you're playing the melody in a clever way, then you're probably going to be doing a pretty good job as a banjo player. So that's probably the number one thing I'm thinking about.
I like that. I'm going to use that phrase at next class tonight, melody within rolls, because a lot of banjo players, who are learning, don't really know what to play in a solo. And I say play the melody, but I'm not a banjo player, so I can't really help them that much. But melody
It's
within rolls is a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, it's definitely an acquired skill. As a teacher, I can speak to that it's a process, and there are a few ways, that I try to teach it. But the biggest way is just to listen to great banjo solos that do it, and then learn a bunch of great banjo solos that do it, and then start crafting your own. There's no magic bullet.
Mm-hmm. What's on your so-called bucket list now? Anything special? I know you're busy teaching, you're still tour with the Grascals, but anything special either now or coming up that you're working on or want to work on?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, always playing with the Grascals, always teaching the lessons. Got 4 new songs with Benson that I'm going to be mixing next month. And, I mean, it's all this cool stuff. I mean, I just about to teach at the IBMA Hall of Fame, and then I'm doing an event at the Scruggs Center in North Carolina, another banjo camp, and then the New Mexico Banjo Camp, and doing Bela Fleck's Blue Ridge Banjo Camp. Again, I've been blessed to be there every year in August in Brevard, North Carolina, and I'm missing some stuff, but it's just this interesting, life that I get to live. And as I've aged, it's become more banjo centric, still very bluegrass centric, but they're kind of separate worlds. They definitely overlap. If you had that Venn diagram, there's a huge overlap, but the banjo community is different than the bluegrass community. And I have really, really, really loved spending more time in the solely banjo community. And it's big these days, and just phenomenal creative, inventive players that I've gotten to know, a lot of young players that are incredibly exciting, and I'm so blessed to know most of them in and outside of bluegrass. So, I really feel like my time is split between those two things, and I'm lucky.
Yeah. When you do a lot of bluegrass camps, as you do, for each one, do you have to kind of come up with a new program, or can you just kind of go in there and do what you do? In other words, you have to think about and plan out what you're going to be doing at each camp differently, depending on the camp, or is it you kind of got it down by now?
Well, sometimes I think there's a concerted effort to be sure that you're not going to end up teaching the same topics. You got to plan enough
I hope you enjoyed our podcast, and thanks for listening. Visit our website, guitartownct.com, for concert and podcast schedules, or just to send us a message. We'd love to hear from you.